It is not Rush Limbaugh. It is not trying to be Rush Limbaugh. It is GrokTALK. But I like this song, and it had occurred to me that I had not yet used it. Your mic's on.
Yeah, it's
You may
great.
interject.
It's great.
I like the song a lot, so I figured I should play it.
And we aspire to excellence in broadcasting, or at least to truth in reporting.
Yeah. I don't know. We have 7.1 million listeners, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, so Skip is trying to get old Jerry. He's not picking up his phone. We did suspect this might happen. But Jerry is on scene, and he has been for at least a week or so, at the Bundy Ranch in Bunkerville, Nevada. He's been assigned to homestead security duty there, and he's working with others, and it's a great story. A lot of confusion about what's really going on there, and we can certainly talk about that. I mean, I did see that Snopes debunked the Chinese solar farm thing, but we already knew that because it's a domestic solar farm thing. And anyway,
yeah, and that doesn't alter the fact that there's a picture only a few months old of Reed joining in a groundbreaking only a few miles away from the Bundy Ranch. And also, the claim was never that the feds wanted the Bundy Ranch to plant the solar panels. They wanted the Bundy Ranch because, in the weird way that federal environmental wacko regulation works, if you take a piece of land here to fry some birds, you've got to grab a piece of land somewhere else to not fry birds.
They call that mitigation. Yes.
Yes.
yes, I know you're familiar.
I would call mitigation the same thing that Clive and Bundy would call it. We disarm all the federal agents. They have no right to be armed. They are a standing army, which is explicitly forbidden.
I was explaining it to my wife because she wasn't, she doesn't follow politics like we do, and I told her, I said, well, here's what it comes down to. You got a guy whose family's been raising cattle on this land, grazing them for 100-something years, right? And so they take care of the land. The land is in good shape. The cattle are in good shape. People buy the cattle, cows. We have eat. It's a service that we provide. It's necessary. It's useful, and so on and so forth. I said the government wants to. They've kicked all the other ranchers out, right? And
and he's the last man standing. And,
and
it's not even about the grazing fees.
It's not.
They don't. Well, it's sort of, the grazing fees are a convenient hook to drag him into court.
What I told her was that he has no problem paying them if he's paying the state or the county. He doesn't really think the federal government's got any business. 87% of Nevada is federal land.
Well, it's like what you said about SB 120, where they take our money and they use it to pass legislation to stop us from spending our money on things that we want to spend it on, and they use our money to enforce that legislation. The same thing. Why would Clive and Bundy want to pay the Bureau of Land Management to support and feed their standing army, which they then turn against him? It's like feeding a pack of Rottweilers in the neighbor's yard, knowing that any day he could open the gate and have them eat you.
Did Jerry not recognize the number, maybe, and he just isn't picking up?
Yeah, why don't you call from your cell phone, Skip?
Yeah,
That's a decent
do that
idea.
and then let him know, and see if we can get him on the phone, because this is an important segment that I promoted that may have attracted some live stream traffic that we won't have if he doesn't show up.
Right, and let me also add that a couple of days ago, Stuart Rhodes, who is the president and certainly one of the founding members of Oath Keepers, who is on site in Bunkerville, Nevada, interviewed both Jerry DeLemus and one of the Nevada legislators who is out there, a lady.
And that's posted on Granite Grok.
And I grabbed those videos
Jerry?
and put them on.
Yeah.
Put them on Granite Grok.
Yeah, I'm going to call you for your interview.
So they're already up there, and you can see Jerry in his own words. What is completely clear is that Jerry, like most of the people that are down there, are not domestic terrorists, but are in fact doing everything they can to keep the peace. And it is the feds who showed up in overwhelming force with brutal methods, destroyed property, destroyed cattle. But Skip now has located Jerry, and we're going to have him online in a moment. Next up, I'm actually putting up a post of Who Owns the West, along with a nice piece by a Persian. Notice Persian, not Iranian. When they self-identify as Iranians, you've got a problem. A Persian who is schooling the United States on the constitutional meaning of who owns the West. He is, in fact, the Tennessee director for the 10th Amendment Center, and I'll have that post up shortly.
Excellent. Rick, what do you think?
Well, I think this stopped being about ranches and fees a long time ago when the federal government showed up, the BLM, with all their armies. So, well, anyways, we go to Jerry.
Jerry Delimas is with us live from Bunkerville, Nevada. Jerry, good morning.
It's Bunkerville.
Bunkerville, yes.
Yeah, Bunkerville. Yep.
Good to have you on. How's the weather this morning in Bunkerville, Nevada?
It's actually beautiful. It'll warm up a little later, but it's pretty clear skies and it's beautiful scenery. It's it's a lot like Afghanistan, to be honest with you, but it does have its own beauty.
So, you're there, so you know what's important at the moment. Why don't you share with us your current observations of the situation?
Well, one of the things I do know is they're stacking up U.S. Ranger cars and Fed cars and down in Las Vegas. And they've probably got 2 hotels, parking lots about stacked up as full as they can get with them. So it leads me to believe they're thinking they're doing something, and not quite sure what. But which makes you a little nervous being up here. And the interesting thing is with Mr. Bundy, is if they had some charge to arrest him for, which he hasn't broken any law, is they could just drive one of the local police up because they know him, and go knock on the door, and if they want him to go to jail, he'd go. And he's told them that.
He's told the whole nation that.
But rather than that, as they're gearing up for, it looks like, for war, with that many officers out there, I mean, I don't know what other reason they'd have him here. And it's the same crowd that was giving him a hard time last time when they took that 600,000 acres away from him. So, it makes you a little nervous. Our encampment, which is the oddest darn thing that I got put in charge of it. But actually, since I have been put in charge of it, I moved it the first day I was here, and then we're just stacking people up in here. Like mad, there are volunteers coming from all over the country, and as they know, there's a need to stand up for the Constitution and for people and families like the Bundys who are just the salt of the earth. So, and they know it can get bad, and because I'm real clear with them on that. Not that we would ever fire the first shot, because everybody knows that, but our ROEs are real explicit on that. And to be nice to all law enforcement, and if they're thirsty and you're standing there, offer them a water, And the local law enforcement guys are outstanding. They're great. Their kids go to school with the Bundys kids, and they've known each other. The Bundys have been owned this properties for 140 years. So it's the federal government that's the problem, and a problem they have been, and they're ruthless. I mean, Harry Reid comes out and calls, actually, as I read the article, one of the articles in the paper, he didn't so much even call us the terrorists, as what he did is he called the Bundys domestic terrorists. And a guy who's a senator from this state who is so concerned about these people couldn't even find the time to go over and see them and see if he could, make a resolution to this. Instead, they do things like that, which just amps it up and amps it up. And but I don't think they want a peaceful resolution to this anyway. So
Jerry, this is
my
Skip.
observation.
Yeah, this is Skip. You and I talked yesterday, and one of the things that had been rumored to have existed, you actually saw it, and I want to just turn this a little bit in a little bit different way. This whole thing is supposedly about conserving the land. That the federal government, the BLM, the Bureau of Land Management, is all upset because of these desert tortoises. And the land is being ruined by the cattle, and yet now the story is coming out. They actually crushed one of the tortoise dens and crushed all the live young that were there. But you saw the destruction that they've actually done to that area. And also there was a mass grave. Can you talk to us about that? Because I haven't received any pictures just yet.
Well, I haven't. We've got them downloaded, but I haven't been able to send them to. But I will send those to you. And first, you've got to get the scope of this country. It's got all kinds of little buttes in it, and it's pretty rugged terrain and pretty dry, except the basin of there's a little river valley which the Virgin River runs through, which goes right through the Bundy's property. But when you get out in it, it turns into, which I'll send you some of those photographs, into some really, it's majestic, but it's brutally tough terrain. And what happens is the Bundys, they free range their cattle, and trying to imagine how big 600,000 acres is a little bit much for you to even have a conception of how big that is. But what happened is when the BLM came in and refused to let the Bundys back onto that property, which their great grandfather had paid in full for those grazing rights, is when they wouldn't let them in, what the BLM did is they put guards at all entrances to that, armed guards, and then they went in there and they had free range of cattle over that land. So I mean the cattle are scattered all over, and they went in, and the water lines that the Bundys had put in for decades ago, 40, 50 years ago, some more, to put up troughs for these animals because it's a high desert area, they went and broke the water lines. They cut up the water storage tanks and then rolled them down the hill. The Bundys, when they put all this stuff in, they camouflage painted them so that if people were out looking, they wouldn't see them, so that it wouldn't break the view of the property. And they tore the water up that the cattle would have to drink. And then what they did is they started separating the herds. They'd grab the cows and leave the calves, and then run them down and try to. They had the big compound over here, which I have gone through, and but they didn't let me stop. They gave us a police escort through it, but and they run the cattle down there to that compound, and we're supposedly going to truck them out. But what we found, and I got a guy who's doing a documentary, which I spoke quite a bit in that, is that, and I told him there's a mass grave there. Well, he happened to get in there before with the Bundy family, because I sent him over so he could, and he filmed it. I mean, what it was is it's a mass grave, kind of like Auschwitz, if you would, one of those big graves you'd see, and you'd see all the body parts sticking out, their arms and the legs, with the cattle, obviously, it's all legs and calves parts and all that, because they only covered about 2/3 of it in with their excavator. And the rest of it, the open section was full of just dead cow bodies. And so what they did is they took the herd over there, and then they shot them. And they're missing about, as far as they can tell, but they haven't done an accurate count, probably about 300 head. And so on my journey, I went out the day before yesterday. We went out on a four-wheeler with one of their foremen and another cattle rancher in northern Nevada who's having the same problem. We went out and they showed us one of their prize bulls, which would have been for breeding purposes, that they've had forever. And what had happened is there was like a round pin put up, and it wasn't at the compound; it was outside the compound, quite a ways out. And when they'd had that bull in there, you could tell that the bull had been in. There wasn't any water trough or anything, but what you noticed inside there is a skid mark started. And there was no like the fence had been kicked or anything like that. So the bull obviously wasn't in a rampage. You have a 1,200, 2,000-pound bull in there. If he wanted to knock that thing around, he could, but he didn't. And because they're animals will walk right up to you. So what we did is I followed that skid mark, and with that drag mark, if you will, I followed it about maybe 1.25 miles, somewhere around there. Right out through the open flat of that prairie, and there at the end of that was that bull who had been shot right between the eyes, and it was left there to rot. And that was one of the prize bulls. The reason they drug that bull off is because they didn't want the public or anybody seeing it over by that round pin that they had left, and so they just tried to go hide it after they shot it. And then we went out quite a ways on the other side of the ranch, and there was another bull that they had just shot, and it looked like they just used it for target practice with an automatic weapon, and they diced it up pretty good. And in those areas is where in that one particular area is where the tortoises that they're so worried about preserving have their habitat. And what I saw was truck from the guys you could see when they were running the cattle and moving things around that they had backed over the tortoise dens, I guess is what you call them, caved them in. I had my hands inside of there actually, and two of the dens, and to see if I could find one of the tortoises, but the ground's pretty tough around here, and I wasn't going to go too deep in there because there's also rattlesnakes. But they had completely flattened those, and then they got off the road with their trucks, and they spun circles around and backed in and ran over. They took I must have had electric sawzall or a chainsaw or something, and they cut a bunch of the protected species of brush that grows out here, I guess is what you'd call it, and cut that down to get it out of the way. I mean, they just drove in like they're on a construction site with no regard for anything. And the Bundys, when they drive, they don't back off the road because it's a dirt road. They don't back off of it when they're turning around. They stay on it and just do all the turns they need to get turned around. And they said, well, would get I believe it was $100,000 fine and 6 months in jail if we went off the road with the truck.
I guess you got to be with the BLM, huh?
Yeah, well, the BLM is what they did is they hired private contractors and they spent $3 million doing it. I guess the cost of that whole operation was about $3 million, and I think the contractor might have been $1 million even to go round up this cattle. And they use helicopters and God knows what, and they're out there shooting them. But what it was calving season, so the baby calves were born. And they take the mothers away, and once they could catch. And then the calves were left out there to starve, and they left some of them in tins to dehydrate. And the Bundys went out there and let them out, and then would bring them home so they wouldn't die. And they had to bottle feed them. And I know they've lost some of them, but then you see the cow, the mother, and she's in full milk, so her udders are full, the milk bag is full. There's no calf. And so what she ends up doing is getting a poisoning in her udders because there's nowhere for that milk to go, so it's not being drained off. And it's just a tragedy. I've never seen anything like it. It shows the ruthlessness and the lack of concern and just the inhumanity of treating an animal.
All right, Jerry, we're going to take 60 seconds. Stay on the line. We'll be right back, okay?
All right.
Thanks.
When asked whether she still supports Obamacare, Senator Jeanne Shaheen said,
"Yes, I do continue to support the law. We're beginning to see some positive results."
How can Senator Shaheen say we're seeing positive results when 22,000 of our neighbors have already lost their health insurance? What's worse, the Boston Globe reports the state's only health insurance provider radically reduced the number of hospitals in their network, forcing some people to drive over an hour for lab work, even when there's a hospital within a few miles of their home. When pressed about lack of access, Shaheen said,
"There are some hospitals that are not covered, unfortunately, and I certainly hope that's going to change."
Jeanne Shaheen
bring that up when we come back.
us we could keep our doctors and our health care coverage.
Just
Now
keep it short,
she
'cause
hopes
Jerry's got
we
lots
can
of
get
good
to a
stuff.
local hospital. Call Senator Shaheen at 603-647-7500. Tell her we need more than hope. We need leadership. Paid for by Citizens for a Strong New Hampshire.
GrokTALK.
All right, we're back with Jerry DeLemus. Did we hear all that online because I left my mic on? Did everybody get that? I want Mike to repeat what he said because it was good. Let me turn you on first. I don't know which mic you're on anymore because all the headsets are screwed up.
I'm
Go
on
ahead.
my original mic.
Okay.
So Jerry, what you said about cruelty to livestock, to protected species, and starving the calves reminds me of the article about the story in Iron County, Utah, where they have so mismanaged the wild horse herds that not only are they abusing the ranchers, but they're also likely to have thousands of wild horses starving this summer in the dry conditions.
Well, the deer and such in the area, they'll feed off those water troughs as well. And I mean, they've been accustomed to it because they've been there for a generation or two. So the livestock knows where the water is, and so do the wild animals. They'll come in and try to get it. One other thing I wanted to bring up there, Mike, is that they have it's kind of like a round pin if you know anything about horses, and it's kind of like a bunch of gates of tubular steel, and it makes a circle. Well, this one had a divider down the middle of it. Each section had a gate that was hooked onto a powerful spring. and the spring would the door could be locked open, and then they would have a trip lever that's tied to a rope that goes to some hay. So what they were doing is they were trying to trap the cattle to go in there, and they'd grab the hay. Once they got inside, they'd pull the hay to eat it, and then the doors slammed shut. Well, there was no watering mechanism in there whatsoever. So if the cattle were in there and left unattended, they'd dehydrate and die. And but the odd thing is after BLM had pulled out, they had left those doors locked open. And so any animal that would have gone in there and tripped that, it would have been a death sentence for them. And these are the guys who were saying that the Bundys shouldn't be on this property because they need to protect these animals, when in fact the BLM, as obvious, had no regard, didn't care one bit about those animals, any of the animals, and not even the tortoise. And I got to tell you, it's really unnerving, and it's troublesome to know that you have people out there that our government is hiring and paying to do this type of damage to the citizens and their property. Something that this family's had, since 1878, I believe it was 1877. Their family's been on this property, and it's really wrong in so many ways. I went out to. And then there's the intimidation factor of what the Bundys have done. They're Mormon. They're a Mormon family, and which I didn't know when I came here because I didn't care. I just knew that when I talked to Mr. Bundy that he said he needed help, and I knew for whatever I was convicted to go. And here I shot off and came. But they've got their little ranch house. People say they're rich and blah blah blah. They've got this little house. One-story house, the siding's not even finished in it, and I must have lived there forever. I mean, it's got to be, 50, 60 years old maybe, I'm guessing. But it's crowded with kids and grandkids and great-grandkids in there. And I believe there's 14 children, and I said 48, but Sue said she had heard 52, I think, grandchildren. Plus there's great-grandchildren. And they're a real close-knit family. They're always together. You walk in the door, and they're feeding you. It doesn't matter who you are. You should have something to eat, and they'll feed you. But as I've noticed all the things in the house, there's nothing expensive or extravagant about their lifestyle. I mean, they have their horses. They ride around on cow ponies out here, as you'd see it. And if you watched any cowboy movie, that's who these people are. And they're all working, all the kids. They have their cowboy boots on and their spurs and their cowboy hat or a cap, and they go out and work the cattle. And although their area is much smaller now since the BLM has stuck their nose in it. And around that house, which it sits fairly off alone, it's got a little, like a little creek almost out in front of it. And what happened is the BLM snipers were setting up around that house, while this was all going on, they were keeping guns drawn and snipers aiming at that house with those kids. And the parents wouldn't let the kids outside to go play in there because they're afraid they were going to get shot. I had one of the moms come up to me, was I'm in full battle gear, and leaving the house once, and she grabbed me. She said, "Jerry, this is the first time that the kids have been able to play out in the water," and they're laughing and giggling. And I got to tell you, there's something wrong. There's something really going on that is wrong in our country, that a family can't let their children out of their house because the federal government's setting over these people who haven't raised a violent hand to them at all. There's no charges that they pointed a gun at them, and they haven't, or raised a fist at them, and they haven't. They're a gentle, good-natured, loving family. And they're slow speaking, they're Western, and these people have to live in fear. Their kids have to live in fear, and that we have to come from New Hampshire and all kinds of other states of this country to stand guard over them so that they don't end up getting shot by these guys. And because there's no. I can't even think of what went through their minds that they thought that they needed to have snipers aiming at people in that house. I just can't. I'm a tactical thinking guy, and I can't think of a single reason. I'd never do it. I just don't know how you do it.
Right.
And,
So, Jerry, in your call to Sue early in the week, you mentioned that they were setting up snipers around you. Now, Harry Reid specifically accused you guys of having snipers to intimidate the BLM into leaving. I somehow think that was not the case, but why didn't you tell it in your words?
Well, first off, I want to say this about Harry Reid. He's a coward and he's a liar, and he's breaking his oath to the Constitution. And I actually challenged him on a video that somebody did last night to come call me a domestic terrorist to my face, because I told him, you get within arm's reach of me and you make that accusation. I served honorably in the United States Marine Corps. I'm out here defending people that you who are terrorizing them, that there's a domestic terrorist, it's Harry Reid and him and the BLM. And I don't know what they've got cooking out here. I mean, I hear stories about it. There's some stories about him and his son out here, that they've got other business deals going on with the Chinese. And I mean, you got to wonder how these guys get that rich in Washington. And a lot of it is for real estate deals. But Harry Reid calling us domestic terrorists is ludicrous. All we're doing is protecting these people. I was asked the first night I got here to go on guard duty. I mean, I pulled in and we had slept. I did the majority of the driving, so we went out and did guard duty. I got into the SAC for about an hour, and actually didn't even set our tent up. I was just on a cot. I was on a cot for an hour, and then the Bundys. One of their sons, Ryan, who is just a wonderfully nice man, pulled their stock trailer up in front of us, and they had 2 cow ponies in it. And they asked me if we could give them protection while they went out and tried to get some of the cows before they died. So that's what the Bundys were doing, is trying to protect the animals. They weren't doing it for the money. They were doing it because they're animals, and they don't want them to suffer needlessly. So we jumped in. I had 5 guys fully geared up. It looked like any other military operation, except for as a civilian truck. I had one other with me in the cabinet front, and here we go down the road. So we're carrying down the road, and they're pulling off, and they're looking in their field glass and looking for cattle. And as I'm following that truck, and we're going down, I see that I'd seen the cowboys get in, and the 2 horses in the back that are under saddle, and it dawned on me that these guys are just trying to go to work, and yet they have to ask me and other American citizens and other American patriots to be armed and to be able to follow them and protect them from our government, so they can just go to work, so they don't get shot or killed.
Hey, Jerry, can you hang on for a little bit longer? I want to take another break, but we want to keep talking to you if you're available.
Yeah, I am.
Okay, so hang a second. We're going to take another 60-second break, and we will come back with Jerry DeLemus in Bunkerville, Nevada. There we go.
This is a coalition of New Hampshire taxpayers. We're located at 8 North Main in Concord, New Hampshire. This is a repository for all things conservative and municipal. So if you have a problem in your town, your school, your budget committee, the right to know law, and now the top of our list is voter fraud. You have a tip for us, some information for us, you want to join or help us out, cnht.org.
Hi, this is Rich Gerard, host of Gerard at Large in the Morning, the Manchester area's only locally owned, locally operated, focused, and interested, riveting radio show, heard live every Monday through Friday from 6 to 9 on 90.7 FM WLMW New Hampshire Family Radio, and available 24/7 live or archived at GerardAtLarge.com. Be sure to tune in.
GrokTALK.
And we are back. This is Skip Murphy. I am joined by, a whole bunch of Groksters with Steve and Rick and Mike and Scott. And we are talking with Jerry DeLemus, who is from New Hampshire, but is out in Bunkerville, Nevada, at the Clive and Bundy Ranch with a bunch of other patriots. And Jerry, you were telling us a powerful story at the very end where the cowboys who work for, or part of his family, or work for him, are basically saying, folks, can you follow us because you are armed and we're scared to go out and just do our regular job to protect us against our own government. And you know, a lot of us are thinking, you know, this is not a good thing for us to be. In fact, Rick was starting to say this has gone way beyond the cattle and the cows. So, Rick, did you have an observation?
The thing that has struck me all along up until last Saturday is I was looking at the story and I was trying to look at it with an objective eye, and then all of a sudden it occurred to me this isn't about cattle anymore. This isn't about land. It's not about turtles. It's about the awesome power of the federal government being sicked on a single citizen. And I think that's the lens through which people are viewing this now. Is that a fair assessment, Jerry?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, it definitely is. And I got to tell you something. When we went out the day before yesterday, out in that four-wheel drive little car, if you will, there was a fella, and he's probably in his 70s. His name was Cliff. He's from northern Nevada. His family had their ranch going, and they'd used the land, cut a deal with the government for grazing rights, and they did theirs in 1862, and they've shut him down, and he's down from 600 head, which he started with, and it's generational farm ranch, mind you. He's down to about 100 head. And which really, I mean, you got to think about your the amount of money that you would make from it. I mean, you're going from 6 down to 1. I mean, that's a huge cut in income as well. So he told me we're riding, and everybody knows we're here from New Hampshire. I got to tell you, they all know that New Hampshire is here, and they are so proud and so thankful to all of you and us for coming. But he told me, he said, you know, if I run those cattle out there, the BLM told me if I put those cattle back on that land that my family's been using for those years, again, that they're going to throw me in prison. And I said, you know, I knew there were other stories out there because there's a lot of them, because they've run most of the guys like us out in place and put the corporate ranchers. That's what they're doing, is they're allowing the corporate ranchers to operate, and they're taking our land and then they're federalizing it so that nobody can use it except the government for what they want to do. And
Jerry, that's an important point.
He said, I'll give you one more at this. He said that he asked me, he says, Jerry, can I have your phone number? And I said, yeah, I'm sure you can, Cliff. And he said, because in 2 weeks I'm letting my cattle back out on that land. He goes, will you help me?
Wow. You know, and I think Rick is got the point where the federal government has really starting to become not the governing, but the ruling. And you and I have talked about this before in the past, and I know you're there. But certainly those out west have an animosity that we don't necessarily share here in the Northeast, because the feds own so much of that land, 87% in Nevada, and almost the same thing in almost every single other western state. And how much is there of a push to say, enough is enough, return the land either back to the state or to give it to us who actually wish to conserve that land?
Yeah. Well, Mr. Bundy offered to, because what he did is he fired the BLM because they weren't upholding their end of the agreement. And they were doing lousy land management. He said they were doing a horrible job, so he offered to give the money to the state of Nevada to go ahead and for those grazing rights, even though he didn't think he owed it to him. He never believed that. And I don't want to put words in his mouth, but that's kind of the conversations that we've had about that. But he was willing to pay it anyway, and it's just not to have trouble, but they wouldn't take it. And the concern out here is that the government's taking all their land. But don't forget in New England as well that they're taking a lot of conservation money, and they're setting up these little conservation zones, and they're taking these old farms, and they get conservation commissions, and it's backed with federal money, and they're taking these big farms. They're doing it there, and everybody out here knows. You want to talk about people know what Agenda 21 is? These people know what Agenda 21 is because they know that's exactly what this is. It's funny because we come out here and we think we're so smart in New England, because we're always on these deals and we're going to meetings and all that. These people are living it, and they know exactly what it is. They had a fundraiser for the Bundys. There's a little stage and stuff down by the river, by the Virgin River across the highway, and there must have been, I don't know, a live band, and it's a well-known band. I don't know what their name is. They volunteered, and they came for nothing to play. And there must have been, I don't know, 2,000-3,000 people, maybe more there in support of them. And they were talking about land grabs. They were talking about an oppressive federal government, and they're all hooting and hollering, yay. They acknowledged us from New England, from the States, which I turned around. I was like, wow. But I walk through the crowds there, and they stop me, and they they shake my hand and say, thank you for coming, thank you for helping us. If you hadn't been here, and the other boys, obviously, is we don't know what would have happened. And we walk around. It's funny because we didn't have our rifles with us on this particular event, and one of the gals stopped me, and she had her kids and her husband were there, and I said, and her son goes, well, where's your bigger gun? And I said, well, we didn't want to bring him in here because there's so many people in here, and we didn't want anybody being scared. And the mom looks at me and she goes, we feel better when you have them.
They know whereof they speak. Well,
yeah. Well, I got to tell you, these people are patriots, and they work hard. Working this land is tough business for them, and they love this country. And there's a lot of former military here, and there's some that obviously there's those that aren't. But they love this country. They love this land. And I got to tell you, as I walked out there with Corey on that land, he'd take some sage or whatever it was and rub it and smell it, and he'd tell me what this was. He'd tell me when this happened. And they're just gentle people. Gentle. I mean, all their actions. It made me feel like a clumsy elf, to be honest with you. They're like I must barge through life, and they take it all in. They know every inch, everything that goes on. There's 600,000 acres. They can tell you a story about every lick of that land. And they took us up to a point. It was about 8,700 feet, and there's a TV station that's got an antenna up there, and it took us up there. And I got to tell you, that's a scary ride. And we looked over that vast 600,000 acre piece, and it's astounding. It was astounding. And but the federal government could come in, and Harry Reid and his cronies can come in and go, oh, no, you don't get to have that anymore. And then start making all kinds of accusations about those people and their character. I got to tell you, if there was a problem with Mr. Bundy's character, he wouldn't have 3,000 people in a small community coming out to support him. Neighbors, friends, the people are coming in who have been associates of his and friends of his from all over. Some of them are up in Utah, some of them are out in other states, and they're coming together to support him. And on top of it, the whole community. My son Josh is out here with me, and one of the local Metro Police out here, because that's who runs it out here. He was going into a store. And one of the policemen saw him, and he came over to my son, and my son's going, uh-oh, and he's all in camis and stuff. He's got a sidearm on, and I don't know, I don't think he had his rifle because they don't really take those in the stores. But the policeman walked up to him, and he goes, you're from New Hampshire. He goes, yes, sir, that's right. And he grabs him and shakes his hand, and Josh is shaking his hand, and then that police officer grabs him and pulls him in and gives him a hug. It says, thank you. Thank you.
Which just goes to show that the local police and sheriffs understand and respect the Constitution in a lot of cases, and that the feds have just lost all respect for the people, and which is why the people are losing respect for the federal government. This is a great way to end a country. So I get a little turn of phrase for you, Jerry. We like to twist words here, and after you mentioned the cow grave, I coined the word cowschwitz, which you can thank or hate us for. Seriously, we just put up a piece about the federal claims on the ownership of that land. And I'm thinking back, when those were territories, the federal government encouraged homesteading. They encouraged people like Clive and Bundy and their family to go out there to work, improve, and claim that land. And it's only since we've had these three-letter agencies started by FDR mostly that the federal government thinks it owns the land. And there's a piece here by a Persian American in Tennessee for the 10th Amendment Center. He put up an excellent article at benswan.com, and I've linked to it, about the real meaning of the Constitution and what the federal government can and cannot own without the consent of the states. And it ain't much.
Well, I want to share a little something else. I mean, obviously they're killing the livelihood of these people. They'll probably go after them in court and for whatever the cost they overspend as the government does, because of that the cattle on the hoof would have probably sold about $250 a head on the hoof. But the federal government, because they're so thrifty, they spent $3,300 for the ones that they actually got, and to get those cattle out of there when they could have just let the Bundys sell them out of there, and it would save us millions of dollars as taxpayers if that had been the case. But I want to share a couple other things with you. I had one today. I had 4 yesterday. People who are out here tell me that they've lost their jobs because they're out here. And I tell them, go home, go get back to your job. They go, Jerry, we're sticking with you on this. This is the right thing to do, and we can't in good conscience leave. I had a talk last Sunday, and I had to get everybody together because the Ranger Service, which is out here, the own part of it, there were some real threats that they may be coming in with. I'd watched them myself drop a sniper team off through one of my scopes the night before. They inserted them, and then they were spotted up on the hill. So I called the whole group together, and we were quite a bit smaller than we are right now because we're growing. And I brought them together, and we normally take hands and pray, and I'll lead them in prayer in the morning. And so after that, and I said, look, the chances are if we end up in a fight here, because we're not going to fire the first shot, militarily that's a fool's move. But as being a citizen here in this situation, we have no choice but to wait and to set ourselves up for them to be able to shoot us. If that's the choice that they make, and then we can defend ourselves. But I think to have any integrity whatsoever, we have to let them take the first shot. And everybody here is fully aware of that. But I had to tell the people who have driven from all over this country out here, and they're of all ages, and there's women and their husbands, and some who had no firearms ever, never fired one, didn't have one then. I said, if we get into a conflict with the federal government, they're going to rain down a huge force on us. They've got billions and millions of dollars to spend on this, and they spend millions of dollars on this. And I know they're tapping our phones, and they've got everything going on that they need. The drones are over, the helicopters and the planes coming over and swooping down on us to film us. I said, you know what? If they come in full force and they don't want to talk, they decide, because we're not breaking any laws, mind you. We're not breaking any laws. We're here by invitation of the Bundys on their property, and we're not breaking any laws. We're not doing anything to break a law. That we'll probably all die here. It'll probably take every one of our lives. And I want you people to know that if you decide that you want to go home, and because you've all done more than enough, more than 330 other million Americans have done, is you can go home, and it's no harm, no foul, and none of us will think less of you. Not a one of them left. Matter of fact, what's happening is more are coming. And I tell every one of them when they come. And I didn't ask for this position that I'm in. I had no intention of this. And I'm not even a militia guy. I'm a Marine. You guys know me personally. When I get out there and I talk, and I can't stand when things aren't being led and organized properly. So I'm a doer. I jump in and help. And they handed the whole caboodle off to me. There's a couple militia outfits down the road from there, real small. It's probably like 4 guys. We're not attached with it all. They don't want to come under the umbrella. But everybody else up here, they come here. They just come here. And they've seen some of the videos I get people shaking my hand all the time saying, I saw that video, and I don't know what video they're talking about, and half the time I don't remember what I said. I just spell it out from my heart, and because it's true.
Hey, Jerry?
And they ask me how I say that, and I go, because it's the truth. It's easy to remember.
Yeah. Jerry, we're getting near the end of the segment here, because we've gone over our normal time. And I want to just end with a couple of observations. One, I think, once again, we're seeing another episode where the consent of the governed is being withdrawn from those that would govern. And also, are we starting to see a time when the government believes that it is the country, even though our elected officials, including Dingy Harry, swear fealty to the Constitution, but now the government thinks that it is above the Constitution, and they just don't understand that most of us don't care about the government, but we do care about the constitutional values.
Time for a state court to haul up Harry Reid and then hang him for treason. he doesn't need to answer to the federal government. It's the state he
Jerry,
answers to.
you still there?
I'm listening. Yes.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yep. Go ahead.
Yeah. So what did you think about that?
Well, we're getting a chopper coming in. This is well beyond politics. This is if you take the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence and you read it, I got to tell you, how many boxes would you not check of complaints that our founding fathers had with the king? There's something wrong in America. It's drastically wrong that people have to live in fear. You can probably hear that bird coming in because he's coming in low. And I just got to make sure they're not inserting. And hope they're not. And it's a Ranger for the Rangers. But they're going to fly right over us. Are you still there?
Yes,
yep.
we are.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay.
That when we have to live in fear of our government, when we're not breaking any laws, there's something wrong. Because I'm going to tell you what I believe, and I believe what most of the people here, and even the people, all the people, our new family and friends here in Nevada, is that we're living in tyranny. And we've got to break that yoke of tyranny. It's not about the politics, whether Harry Reid's a Democrat. Nobody gives two hoots about that. What they do care about is his integrity, and is he fulfilling his oath of office? Is he looking out for the people in Nevada? He's not there to look out for the government's business, the federal government's business, just like the governor isn't when he's elected for the state. It's not their job to take care of the federal government and answer to them, or the sheriff, because unfortunately the sheriff did, I think it was $9 or $10 million a year in grants, so that's why they can't kick off the federal government, otherwise they'll cut those grants, so they own them. So what happens is these people who take an oath to live in the state, they take an oath to defend the state, they're hired to work for the state, their allegiance is turned from the state to the people in the state, it goes right to the federal government, and that's what the governor does, and that's what some of these sheriffs do. The problem is the citizens in this state are left out without any representation. They'll be able to find a judge somewhere pretty easily, I'm sure, because it'll be a federal court, Mike. You must keep that in mind. A federal judge will make a ruling, and the federal government will hold that case and charge that case against these ranchers, and they'll end up taking his 160 acres in the middle of this, and then the 600,000 acres that they have rights to graze their cattle on will be a non-issue.
All right, Jerry, we got to break in. We're going to end the segment. I want to thank you so much for spending some time with us this morning. Good luck out there.
Well, keep us in your prayers, will you? Because it's a dangerous country we're living in right now. I want to say one other thing. If something bad does happen, I'm telling you, we will not be the aggressors in it. And if it does happen, I urge you guys, I'm telling you guys, you stand up and you scream, because this will be a Boston massacre.
All right, Jerry, thanks a lot. We got to go. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Take care.
All right, that's it. That's GrokTALK. You guys have a great week.
Grok TV.